I am going to call the Capital Improvement and Planning Committee meeting to order for December 26, 2023 at 9:01 a.m. All voting members are present. We'll get right into the agenda, which our first order of business was meeting minutes. I did not see any come across for the two that are still open. That I just want to make sure I didn't miss them.
You did not miss the ones. I will definitely do the ones I'm supposed to do this week.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to do a last polish on them.
No rush. We got plenty of time, so we'll move on to the next item then, which is chair's members update. I don't have any. Oh, actually, I do have one. The MSBA selected as the top designer Arrow Street. That is subject to contract negotiations, so we may have a design firm on board by the first week of January. Again, subject to contract negotiations. So the Near Building Committee is scheduled to meet to ratify the contract on, it looks like January 9th at this point. All right, so we're going to dive right into kind of where we left off last week. Appreciate everyone meeting again. So at the last meeting, we had the MIS review of the phone system upgrade. I know, Jeff, you had some questions for Jay, and I believe I've gotten them answered at this point. So I just needed to see where people are at. Jay is offered to come in, not today, but if we need to have him in to formally vote on this, we certainly can. But just want to see where kind of people were at.
Was I supposed to distribute that to the committee? I'm sorry, I don't think I ever did.
I did not, just to avoid. So if you want to let the committee know what your question was and what the answer was, I thought that was the most appropriate way to deal with it.
Yeah, so let me pull that up. So my question to Jay was, I wanted to understand the $25,000 implementation cost first, and then annual operating costs, which were in there of about 38,000. My question was if that was an annual license fee, and for context, what the current system costs the town. And his response was that the quote he received was strictly a budgetary quote and it could change. He attached the quote, which provides a breakdown. And he said, I can provide the price we pay annually to maintain our current phone systems, but it isn't really comparing apples to apples. This is a complete cloud migration that will remove our on-premise phone server, which will make RingCentral responsible for all updates and patches going forward. Cloud's been a big push from the select board, excuse me, and the MTC. So he has provided an option to move the town in that direction. Our current annual maintenance, which maintains our servers and phones, is about $7,000 per year. I can share the screen as well, Jason, if it's helpful from the quote perspective, but bottom line is it looks like it's $7,000 a year for our current system. The quote he put in there was about $38,000 per year, which was basically that was a monthly fee, annualized.
But it's basically a totally different system is the point, right? Although, and but I do think the cost of operating something going forward is very important, right? So I guess we're to people, I think we have three options. We're either in favor of it, or if we're not in favor of it or need more information, we need to have Jay come in and speak to it. And we should give him those questions as a heads up. So I guess where are people at?
The increase in cost, I'd say, is considerable. I mean, given the MTC, this came out of MTC as a recommendation. I'm inclined to say that, they've looked at that, but as capital, I mean, the cost increase, we need to know about the cost of the servers and the cost of actual operating maintenance from our side that we're going to get rid of. I mean, how much of Jay's time is going to be cleared up that he can deal with some other things that might be a problem in the town. So, like I said, I mean, given it came out of MTC, I'm inclined to say yes, but I think as capital, I would like him to come in just to justify it and let us know all the rest of the P's and Q's.
I agree, and I think it's also, is he gonna be able to stand up to it at town meeting, right, and explain that? Because I think part of this operational cost will likely be in the operational budget, which obviously we don't touch, but they are obviously related, as both of you have pointed out at this point. All right, so are there any objections to just having Jay come to our next meeting? He can watch, I can tune him into the first 5 minutes of our meeting to kind of see where our heads are at. I'd say it's safe. Is it safe to summarize? No one's really concerned about the 25K capital expense currently. It's more the what are we signing ourselves up for in future operational budgets? Is that a fair statement? Okay. All right. Next item is town clerk request. I still need a piece of information from Jim to allow us to, in my opinion, even consider or discuss this. So I will check with him and hopefully have this for our next discussion. Which gets us to then the recreation request for the field maintenance article. So Tim was nice enough to put a memo together with what their intentions were. As a reminder, we had been carrying 10K in our budget for resting field repairs. So what they were going to do is rest these fields on a rotating basis to and do the required repairs to keep them at kind of their original condition as close as possible. This article now would replace it and be more like akin to John Perrin's facilities fund, where it'd be an annual town meeting appropriation, capital in nature, but specific to fields in the maintenance of those fields. So I don't know what people's thoughts were, questions, comments.
Are these handled at a rec currently? These expenses, are they handled at DPW? Do we know?
Well, I think it's a combination of we're not doing some, like this whole resting field program is new, right? Because we
Yeah.
invested all this capital 5 years ago. That's number one. Number two is the depending on what it is, I think depends on who does the work, right? Whether it's DPW or rec, but my understanding is no, like basically all like the field maintenance fees, right, that the user groups pay in town go into the general fund. They're not pulled out to the side or anything like that. So
Yeah, and on the surface, it doesn't sound like a bad idea, but at the same time, I'm not sure that it really is accurately going to cover. I mean, we're talking about getting, the DPW is asking for money for a what's the plug puller? The
aerator.
the aerator. Thanks. I mean, is that going to cover the aerator over 5 to 10 years of fees? How is this working? I think is where I mean, I understand, I read the article, but I'm not sure that I really understand the need for that versus having it come out of the general fund unless we're looking to itemize. Or whether we're neglecting and that they're looking for us not to neglect.
Okay. Other thoughts or comments?
So is this gonna be funded through the fees?
No, this would be an appropriation. So the way it would work is town meeting would authorize it, so it'd be part of the appropriation, the tax rate. Now, the town would still collect the fees into the general fund, which then closes up to free cash. But right now, we're not reserving it for recreation. It just goes back into the larger needs of the town.
So this is almost formalizing a current process.
Yeah, but I can't say that anyone can say it's a dollar for dollar right now.
Okay.
Right? Like if you collected, I'm just gonna make up a number, 20,000 in user fees. There's no, right, because you have the mowing of some of these fields and all that are covered by all sorts of different budgets, especially DPW. So Joe, you want Tim to come in or a member of recreation, or do you want to talk to Tim on the side? What do you want to do on that? I think
Yeah.
your questions are valid because we're going to DPW next, right? And have to start talking about some of the stuff there.
Yeah, maybe I should talk to Tim because I'm also interested in how this is going to work in the overall scheme of management. Does that mean that how's the process flow of this going to work? And maybe that's out of our jurisdiction and not my department, but I don't know that understanding the need why to itemize these fields in this particular way, I guess is more the question. Because if it's just coming out of the general fund anyway, is it that we're not paying and doing this work, or does rec, and rec identifies this, so they're looking to segment money away from the general fund so that they have control to do that? You're right. I should probably talk to Jen.
My reading of the memo is the latter. The list at the beginning is really where they've spent money over the last,
Yeah.
since 2019, right? Is what this memo says. But then down below was kind of how they would actually use it. Right now, it has to be in an operational budget for them to spend it. The capital policy would still apply here, though. If they go to do $10,000 at one individual site, they'd still have to come back to capital, even if this fund exists. And remember, the facilities article requires John Parent to go to the town administrator too. So John doesn't have, right, that's their guardrail on that particular fund.
I mean, for me, this is just kind of, I don't know. If everybody else wants to pass it, I think we should just vote on that. It's just, I'm not sure that I really see the justification for it. That's all.
Other thoughts? So here's what I'd suggest we do, Joe. I'd suggest you go talk to Tim. Have him get you comfortable. We, depending on how that conversation goes, we can certainly invite him to our next discussion. If we think it'd be beneficial. I'll be honest, I didn't know what to think before I saw the memo. I'm willing to give it a shot for the first year. You don't have to fund it again, right? You're not committing to something in perpetuity. I'm willing to give it a shot, but have them commit to some sort of additional disclosure. Think about like what the schools do with us, right? They submit a memo every time they're going to use certain types of funds, even though they don't have to. I think that's where I'd take the discussion is, at least where I'm at right now is, what parameters and guardrails we're putting around it, just so that they can actually build support for why this actually is needed, going forward, as opposed to a one and done type situation.
Makes sense.
Is everyone good with that plan? Okay. All right. So let's move on to
Jason?
Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
Let's go back to the phone system again. So let me make sure I understand. So are we actually talking about signing a contract where it's not clear what the future maintenance costs are going to be?
That's the concern that I've heard, at least from Jeff and I think Joe too.
I mean, I would never sign a contract like that. So I'm sorry for being a little slow here. So it seems entirely reasonable that we ask for, I don't know, a 10-year fixed maintenance contract. I mean, that's what businesses do, right? If you're buying a piece of equipment, you lock in the annual maintenance fees. So it can't be unknown. And it seems like it should be possible to call, have a description of the annual all-in costs for operating this system. The 10 years of all-in costs, because we might be very surprised at what that is. And someone else is going to ask that question.
I completely agree. And I think Jeff does, based on where he started his conversation. So
that would be my suggestion. We ask for a clear 10-year budget for annual operating costs, and with a fixed cost for annual maintenance.
Would you be okay with, instead of using the word 10-year, the life of the equipment, or the longest that a municipality can enter into? Because I don't know that we can enter into 10-year contracts.
Fine, but it can't be annual, right? It has to be.
It can't be like the next 2 years. Yeah, I get it.
I mean, there has to be some like 5-year minimum, right? I mean, it has to.
That's what I was kind of getting at. Well, it's 5 or 7. Because I use like, not that it's apples to apples, but like the police have the body camera program, they have their taser program. Those are on like a 5 to 7 year program. So
Yeah, and what I got, Tony, was it looks like a license fees. You rent the units. They're actually, it's not, when I think of Ring Central, I think of a computer-based phone, but it looks like this. Maybe it's both, but it's an actual unit, like it sits in an office. So there's some element of a license fee for that, and there's also the rental of the actual device.
Fine. Yeah,
Right,
whatever.
but there is, to your point, there are going to be expected maintenance costs every year for that.
There's
So,
some way of doing math that shows for the number of expected endpoints what the annual cost will be.
yep.
Thank you.
Okay. And so we got our path forward on phone, and we got our path forward on the recreation fields.
Yep.
Again, I don't, whether we go up or down on those, I don't think they're going to be change our direction in terms of a total capital budget, but we do need to be comprehensive. All right, so let's go on to where I think we stand. So for purposes of the discussion, I was going to just operate off of the file we have in our agenda, which is FY25 capital as of 12/26/23. And we haven't taken positions on most DPW items. I know Bill had submitted a little bit of information on some of the attachments, so to say, that were to go along with the tractor and stuff like that. So, in some of the other equipment that we don't currently own that they want to bring in-house as opposed to, hiring someone every time it happens. So, what I thought I would do is just start with roads to begin with, in terms of how we're going to deal with road maintenance and all these culverts that keep failing. And then we also have the Framingham Road tip project. To me, the culverts, I have a tough time just continuing to fund those as a town when there clearly is a focus from the state, whether it be at the budget level or the grant level, to fix some of these. I'm not saying that none of these things need to not be done, but what I would like to do is potentially create a larger, and Bill is okay with this, I've kind of previewed it with him, a larger road maintenance article for the year, broaden the language that they could use it to kind of design something for whether it be certain culverts or whatever, to allow them to actually get the grants. But what I'm personally not in favor of at this point is just approving all of these things just because they failed. Because once you approve something, I think, and obviously it'd have to go through town meeting and obviously select board and advisory. Once you approve something, there's just not as much pressure or thirst to go for a grant. If you've got funding elsewhere, right? So we can come back to what I think the number should be, but I wanted to test the concept with everyone first based on where we're at from a total capital number.
For all of DBW?
Well, specific to road, I'm going to combine road maintenance and any of the culvert type projects.
Got it.
Go ahead, Steve.
Was there any further explanation of, because I think in one of the meetings a couple of weeks ago we had said, is there a budget, like a bottom line budget that we can give to the DPW to then go back through their wish list and say, well, we only have this much money in order to pass or to vote on, go back and please reprioritize based on this number? Or are we still just working with that first kind of presentation that we had?
To answer your question, no, there is no quote unquote bottom line number based on what we have approved to date, because I think that's that can be dangerous at some point in time, but just to give some perspective, right? Based on what we've approved right now, in what's pending, if we were to approve everything that DPW has in their capital plan, we're looking at $3 million of capital appropriation for this year before any bonding. On average, we've been doing just over 1. So, like, we're looking at 3 times the budget that we've looked at in prior years, and we have some significant articles for bonding, which are incremental to that number. So, I think it's safe to say we need to go down significantly and prioritize some of these things. And Bill completely understands that. But at the same time, as a department head, he obviously has a responsibility to bring forward what he knows about, so that the town isn't surprised if he has an emergency request for something on the way here too. So does that? I know it's not a perfect answer to your question, but
Yeah, I mean, it's so there is a little bit more that we will need to kind of identify as priority versus, you know, kind of the wants of the DPW, which, you know, like you said, you know, he has a responsibility to all of that. So
Yeah.
I just was wondering if over the course of the couple weeks, if there had been any discussion on, well, there's only so much allocated for this, and you know, we'd like to prioritize your priority list again. But that's, you know, that's okay. Thank you.
you're welcome. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, so I'll pick up that thread from Steve. So, and it's sort of, in some ways, in my mind, kind of, it's just a question about like the philosophy of what this committee is supposed to do. It doesn't feel to me like we're supposed to review and prioritize within the DPW budget. Gee, you know, this piece of equipment is more important than another piece of equipment. That doesn't strike me. That's our job. Our job
I would
is
say Bill has done that for us, right?
yeah,
Based on how he
right. But it seems it's, at least for me, it seems like our job more is to provide guidance on, well, I guess maybe we can be a sanity test on, does this really make sense? But so like, what number do we recommend that the DPW not spend more than next year? You know, like what's the biggest number? If it was 1 last year and they're asking for 3, maybe our stand is, well, the capital committee thinks that it should only be 2, but someone else, maybe it's the select board, has to actually make the decision about what's the trade-off, what's most important. You know, and it doesn't feel like we can be in the business of telling the DPW how to exactly run their shop. But maybe we have an opinion about, we just have an opinion about how much money they should spend next year. And if it's more than that, well, then I guess we have to talk more about what our process is here. But you know, like we're a sanity check on what departments want to do. Right. I think it seems like there's a useful function where they have to come and kind of defend what they want to do. So that's very good. But then it seems like the ultimate authority about deciding, well, do we want to allow the let's say we say, oh no, the number should really be no more than 1.5. I'm just picking a number. And if the select board wants to say, no, we're going to let them do 2.25, well, then that's fine, but that's not our choice.
completely agree. But I do think we have to go in with realize. So the 3 million, just to be clear, is all town departments, not just DPW.
Fine.
Right. And in the past, it's been about a 1. Our job, in my opinion, is that we have vetted every capital request and believe it is sound from a process perspective of what that department head went through to bring it forward, that the price is in the ballpark based on the quotes that they've submitted, and that the time is now, right? This is not a year where we have the ability to pull something forward just because it would be helpful or nice to have. Like we're in a true, like, has that department head clearly shown that the asset, if it's a replacement, is at the end of its useful life, and without replacement will impact the service that they're able to provide. And then for anything that's new, have we been able to prove they've been able to prove and document that there's a cost benefit, which then unfortunately crosses into operations. what I would prefer to do is bring the select board and advisory a total capital budget that we think is ready for approval. And then I'd rather it be on the higher side to show the volume of needs, right? If we can really stand behind some of these things, then in the department heads, we should bring it forward. And then as they put their budget puzzle together, which capital is one cog of that puzzle, if the number needs to come down, then we're going to have to probably, there will be discussions between now and the ultimate warrant being finalized of what would come off first, right? Because it may be a DPW item, might be a fire item, might be a police item, right? Like obviously the departments that have the larger amounts of capital are going to be more susceptible to that. But I don't know that we need to chop to a certain number. And that's why I've been very hesitant to throw a number out there. I think I've been very firm in our presentations, at least I've made to other bodies over the past couple of years, is that we're short funding capital and it's going to catch up to us. And we had always warned that FY25 was that year. And that wasn't even factoring in, obviously, the construction projects we have in front of us. So I think we're on the same page, Tony, based on,
Well, so
on
no,
that.
so that was a very helpful kind of summary. So thank you. And so then the 3 million, right, of total capital items, so larger than a year ago, but largely based on what we've heard, right, we will approve them all then,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep. I would say I'm not in favor of a few of them, and I'm happy to walk through that once we go through that. But I think there's a way to corral this thing and get us moving in the right direction. Go ahead,
Okay.
Joe.
And I think I'm sort of in the middle of everybody here in the sense that there are certain things I sort of agree with you. I would pull out the road culvert projects. Those go into a realm of cost where putting them all together and maybe posting it on a road build bond would make sense if we could do that. These are sort of long-term assets, not short-term projects. As far as all the equipment goes, this takes me back to when this committee started and when we were talking about how to finance certain types of equipment and certain types of, and I remember having the conversations that we couldn't bond certain things versus bond other things. But some of these are longer term asset costs as opposed to police cruisers. But, we're talking about just buying all this stuff. And the reality is that, this is binging and purging financially. And that, in some cases, it makes sense to just break this up for a matter of, consistency to the public. And some of this isn't, as you're all talking about, some of this isn't our department, but I think some of it is in the sense that, as Jason was saying, monitoring the amount of capital purchasing in terms of the town makes some sense. And the prioritization of this, some of this comes down to what's needed versus what's wanted. And just because somebody says, I want it, doesn't mean that we need it. And I think that falls into our purview of,
So that makes sense. So of the 3 million, so is there something that's striking you as a want instead of a need, Joe? Right? I guess maybe
Yes.
that's one of the things we should be talking about then.
Yeah, for me, if obviously the hot box and the drum roller, from a business standpoint, I can say, okay, we're going to get a payoff for them, but do we need them? It's more of a want than a need. Not that those are the ones I'd take off, but some of these ones, if we're going down to number 10, do we really need a new hydraulic aerator attachment? I'm not sure that there's a cost proven need for it, even if it does break down once a year. By the time we're getting down into some of the numbers here, the first 5 or 6, okay, I can see them. There's you can make a business payoff need. Those are probably things that may fail because they're old. By the time we get down into this list, this is really more, it turns into how much is actually needed versus, how much is actually wanted. I'd want a new truck too, but do we need a new truck? I'm not sure that that's actually been told to me by this priority list.
I think that's fair, Joe.
I think it's a matter of striking a balance, and I know that all of us should be. I think we can do that.
So let's stick to roads for a second. Then I'm gonna go to the equipment. So when I sum road maintenance article, which is row 2, Framingham Road, which is row 13, Willow Street Culvert, which is row 14, and drainage pipe repair, which I believe is John Street. Those sum to $1,022,000. My recommendation is that we take the 400 of road maintenance and make that 600 for now, but work with Bill and Mark to broaden the scope of that article as it's been previously written, give them a little more leeway to prioritize these projects within the scope of that budget. That's one option. The other option is that we see if Brian would be willing to do a bonding article for road maintenance for this year. That's slightly larger, whether call it $1 million, whether call it 1.5 million, that would be spread across 1 to 3 years. But to me, some of these things are kind of like half baked at this point in time. Like there's a thought, there's a process, there's certainly quotes from one vendor of what it would be. But I don't know that other than our annual road maintenance article, that there's anything substantive there other than the conditions in some of these situations that someone could speak to on town meeting floor. There's just some more work that needs to be done, but obviously the more work that needs to be done, that all costs money too, right? That's not in-house staff that can do a lot of that. So those were the avenues that I was thinking about for acknowledging that our roads need a more significant investment. Not cherry picking one project over another, leaving the DPW operations to the superintendent there. But remember, this article does have a catch-all that comes back through here before the money's actually spent. So you could get town meeting approval, and then they can kind of come back and walk you through how they're ultimately planning to do it. This would just give Bill more time to get his arms around some of these projects and what the true costs are. I realize the numbers may get worse before they get better too, given what we've seen some other stuff. But that was at least where my head was at on road maintenance. I can't support just approving all these as presented because I just don't think there's enough there yet in terms of priority.
When we say road maintenance, because maybe I get hung up on the word here, but maintenance, right? I mean, we wouldn't bond maintenance over
No.
a time period that's longer than the value, than the lifespan of the maintenance work, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But so road maintenance could be your street is next on the list of, needing to be repaired, right? That could involve a simple resurfacing. It could be like a mill and grind where they come and dig everything up and
Sure. Yeah. Whatever they do.
so
I mean,
maintenance is probably not the right word, but that's what they've historically used.
yeah. Okay. I think that's a bad word, but okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
I think part of our problem here is that there are two things going on. One is that we're seeing these larger projects coming up, random, let's call them random projects, even though they may have been historically predicted. And the idea that we probably needed to increase our road maintenance budget anyway. Because I think moving forward, we all acknowledge that the cost is going up and that whatever we budgeted for in the past just isn't going to be adequate. So I think raising it is very advantageous on your part. I'm just not sure that moving forward, any increase, even if you made it 600,000 right at this moment, that any increase would cover these projects. Anything more than seed, sort of this design seed money that I think what you've been pushing, sort of advocating for, and then using that that planning to get more grants and things, which is what I think is a very wise move. Because I think any outside money we can get to cover these types of expenses is absolutely warranted. These are fairly large, and there's probably going to be a lot more of them. We're a town filled with water, so it's going to happen.
Other thoughts? So Joe, would you be in favor of just increasing the road maintenance and broadening the language there?
Yeah, well, I think to your point, it is especially in this year, broadening the language, but moving forward in the years after that, I don't know that broadening the language is going to make that much sense. I think this is going to be more of a permanent increase in the road budget moving forward, just in general.
Yeah,
I-
I mean, the one thing I'd say is I was thinking, no pun intended, this is like a bridge year, right? Like Bill's been here 6-ish months, right? He's obviously got a lot of plans ahead of him. He's inherited a lot of deferred maintenance as well. But he's also, if you think about that beta study that was being performed on the condition of the roads and stuff like that, he's close to finalizing a lot of that will actually inform the longer term plan. But I don't think like one of the things I asked him 2 months ago when I first met him was, would you rather just hold off and wait for that to be done, then fund this stuff? And he's like, no, I need some temporary mechanism to keep going with certain things, but I'm not ready to like actually go for like a bigger, larger package of like, hey, I need $10 million to fix all the roads in town. As an, a much more dramatic example.
Well, if we did, that'd at least be interesting because then we could talk about, sort of bonding a longer term bonding situation where we,
Yeah.
year
Okay.
predictable.
So I am going to move that capital support a road budget that includes, but is not limited to, what we historically refer to as maintenance, culvert design and engineering with a strong preference towards seeking grants, and or exploration of design funds related to the Framingham Road Route 85 tip project in the amount of $600,000. There a second.
Second.
Is there further discussion? I'll just say for purposes of the minutes, I think it'll be important to see how the language ends up in the article. Right, we can come back. That's not something that needs to be done short term. This is, and then we'll also be able to get a reaction from select board and advisory of what process they'd like to see undertaken to make sure that these funds are used accordingly. All right, are we ready for a vote on that particular piece?
Yep.
All right, so roll call vote. Jeff,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Tony,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
and I am aye as well. Now we can go to the equipment. And I'm just gonna take these one by one, if everyone's okay with that. So there's 2 trash trailers, one like really high in the list and one like really low. Remember, Bill was very clear that we don't need both this year, but he was trying to package them. There's no benefit to buying 2 at the same time. You don't get like a buy one, get one X% off sort of deal. But one has actually failed in the last 2 weeks, is what my understanding is now. That one of the axles is in significant need of repair. So I'm inclined to authorize one out of the 2. I don't know what others' thoughts are, but I don't think there's a compelling argument for 2 this year. Go ahead, Steve.
So just going off of that, if it's already had the issue, how long would the process be for us to vote on it to then to go to select board for another vote, or
This is town meeting, so they wouldn't actually be able to buy it until July. Now, Bill thought it was going to be repaired, but it's just an indication of the age of it. I believe this was a 1997 trailer that it goes back and forth in the pike. So
Okay, I was just wondering about the time from when we vote to the time when they might actually get it. So thank you.
our vote is really advisory in nature. It's really town meeting vote that ultimately would fund it. Now there's money in the operational budget for repairs in the meantime, but that's an example. Now, if it was a catastrophic repair, which I have not heard of that yet, then it would come to us in advisory to see if there was something that could be done within the current year. But this was, I provided that data point as anecdotal to the need that I think there's at least a compelling case for at least one of these. Go ahead, Jeff, then Tony.
I would just say on the second one, it's similar to Joe's question, need versus want. I don't really have a good appreciation for that. It seems like we need one for sure, but does Bill just want that second one? That would be my takeaway question on this one.
My understanding, and we can reconfirm with him, was he moved it up knowing that capital was going to be harder to get in out years.
Okay. So it seems like a want.
Go ahead, Tony.
So I'll pile on the need versus want process here, right? So it does seem like that's a reasonable way of thinking about each of these items. In our opinion, is it a need? Based on what we've heard, is it a need or a want? And maybe that's what we should be asking each of the departments when they come in. Is it a need or a want? You know, just that simple.
And if it's a want, to add on to Tony's point, is it revenue generating? Like what are the benefits of doing such?
Yeah. Well, I would hope that if we even approve one of these, that the select board will then at least factor that into how they think about transfer fees. Right. Right. And that's a whole philosophical
but that's a
debate
whole
of
nother,
whether, right?
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it seems like right now all we need to do is go through this list and give our opinion of,
Okay.
is it a need or a want? That's all we have to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think we have that from some of the discussion. And
So
I
let's
clearly heard one, definitely, one, I'm gonna need it soon, but not I need it now.
So then maybe that's the answer.
Well, and I think the other thing to do here, right, is, and we have a good history of doing this, is when, let's just say we took a vote now to approve one and we deferred one, we go back to Bill with that vote and give him an opportunity to react to it and say,
Yeah, absolutely.
you guys are crazy, or no, I'm totally fine with that.
I think it'd be perfectly fine to go back to him now. Maybe we don't even have to vote now. We just go back to him now and say, so please give us your opinion, need versus want for the next fiscal year. Because I can't tell what he thinks.
I'm just going off of my notes from when he was here.
But if you asked him, I don't recall. Maybe the rest of you do, but I can't recall. So,
okay.
But if you have a good sense of that, Jason, that's fine with me.
Well, I mean, I would think, in the interest of trying to kind of see where people are at, bringing him back kind of comprehensively, like, hey, Bill, we didn't hear a true need on this, like urgent, pound the table, but please correct us, and we're happy to revote it, sort of thing would be my approach. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, what I also see is a potential avenue for us here, and maybe not the best and won't be popular in the town, would be to say, look, we're coming up to a point at which we're going to have failures in equipment. And, we don't want to have to buy things prematurely, but we understand that these things are going to happen within a year, and that there needs to be that, like roads, we need to set aside X amount of money every year in a revolving fund where, the select board and an advisory and capital can buy equipment, can issue purchases and buy equipment in year without the need to, for a specific purchase, authority from, town meeting. Town meeting is advocating this fund to do that for equipment and failure. And in that way, we could sort of help the town and help this process move forward by having enough to cover, something like this trailer. And so we could say to Bill, hey, we don't need to pass this year. You tell us what you need this year and we'll put it in town meeting. But if there's one or two pieces of equipment that, that we would have to replace in failure because it might happen, then we'd have at least this amount of money to do that. And that might be something to recommend to the select board and public. I don't know how the rest of the committee would feel about that. I know that it's not a very popular topic in town to do these sorts of things, but with this amount of equipment on the docket, over the next couple of years, I think the justification to go to town meeting and say, hey, we're going to avoid having to purchase things ahead of time by having X amount of money in hold for these equipment failures, and so we can purchase them and cycle makes sense.
My general reaction to I'd love to explore that further. I don't know if we'll explore it further takes. I don't know if we can do that. We need Mark or Brian to tell us that. But what I can tell you is my concern would be the back end of that. Let's just say something fails today, right? And you have that money available, right? And there's no bureaucratic process to get in the way. How long is it going to take them to get that replacement asset? That is the part that concerns me. So, like, I think what we heard with fire as an example, right? They're proactively ordering stuff this year. We're not paying for it for another 2 years, at least, right? Because they know something's going to fail more than it, right? It's the same sort of stuff here. So I know a trailer is a lot different than obviously a truck, or but I think it's a great comment, Joe, that I will add to a future agenda and get Brian or Mark to speak to.
I mean, I thought, so like the fire and police, right? It struck me as more clear where the needs were versus on some of these items on the DPW list. Not to pick on the DP, and maybe they are needs. I just can't tell personally. It's not as apparent, and so.
And I think both of your points right there are very important. And I think that the one thing that what Jason just said, when we're talking about the two different trash trailers, I think that pushes the trash trailer to the top and says, look, we have to have at least one good one. So therefore we have two old ones that aren't, and we're repairing them, obviously paying to repair them, that having one that won't break down, I think is maybe where Bill is, in which case, having Bill come back in just to advocate that fact makes a big difference in the way that we view that. And if we're going to talk about failure of equipment, two old, you'd rather always have one go-to and one scrap than two scraps.
And maybe he'll say, no, you just have to have, you need two of these trailers. And we don't understand. Right. But at least for me, again, I don't want to speak on all of your behalf, but it was more apparent for the police and fire what the needs were. And maybe it's just because it's a new person, new job, DPW, right? And so, but I think it could be made more apparent what the needs are here.
Okay.
Or actually, could I add one more thing to that? Or
Go
what
ahead.
the cost of failure is, like with the sidewalk tractor. If that fails, how, are we really talking about a public safety issue? That'd be good, a good log for the fire.
Okay. So let's do this. Because we're already gonna have to have a short meeting for these other topics anyways. Let's this is recorded. I'll have Bill listen to it first, and then see what he wants to come back with. In where he really wants to push hard. He did prioritize it, right? Like he was very clear with us since day one, right? Like to give him, right? He did prioritize top to bottom where he thought the most critical needs were, but that's under the premise that you only have so much money to spend. I don't think that's the right way to operate. I think it's, where are you hitting a different level of service than what you provide to the residents?
Absolutely. Prioritizing isn't, I mean, that's incredibly helpful, and that's different than need versus want.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. But I think we could easily, if Bill did that, it seems like everyone would be ready to kind of weigh in of, yes, we're going to dig in on this particular issue. There's a disagreement, or no, we follow, kind of his recommendation.
Yeah, if he came back with a 1-page, or even on that spreadsheet, a column, need, want, right? I think then there'd be a few things we could talk about.
Okay. All right, so let me see if I can get that from him. What do people think about this DEP unfunded mandate around stormwater? Like that was another $210,000 that seemed like it was something we have to be doing, but there's no funding around it. I don't candidly know enough to advocate for that at this point, and think it's something that probably also correlates over into conservation a little bit too, and also query whether it's even a capital expenditure. And the dollar amount is capital, but it's a plan, it's not an asset.
This was that expense that we were supposed to have agreed to do within 5 years. Was this that one? Or
Yeah.
something? Okay.
Mhm.
It seems like someone other than this committee has to be able to say, yes, it has to be done, right? It's not.
Yeah. Well,
maybe maybe more purple has to.
Yeah, my question is, I haven't heard that, other than the cost, I don't see how it falls within the capital policy, which if it doesn't fall within the capital policy, doesn't come here. It doesn't mean that someone can't bring a separate article for this that stands on its own. And maybe we have to weigh in tangentially, but I, at least at
I
this
think
point, don't.
my opinion, we just say we have no opinion.
Yeah. Unless someone can come back to us and tell us why we need to have an opinion.
That's right.
Okay. All right. So then I think we've taken DPW as far as we can for today. So the final piece is schools. So we talked about them a little bit last week, right? We took a firm position on Finn. I need to update the number that's in the spreadsheet because I got the new numbers from Keith that he had up on the screen. We basically punted on Woodward in Trotter with a second vote. And then on Neary, I don't think we did anything. Right? Because I think there was do we do anything to a school that likely is going to have significant either renovations or new infrastructure, but also realizing that the life of this capital expenditure is basically the life that's going to remain in that at least existing footprint. So I don't know where people are at on Neary, but we do need to take a thumbs up or thumbs down on that because I don't think we're going to get any more information. Go ahead, Joe.
And on as far as an area was concerned, I think my position was if we're not going to do anything to, to Woodward or Trotter, I don't know why we would do it to Neary. And the only reason to look forward to doing it would be because we're pretty much talking about the life of the school and the life of the equipment pretty much ending at the same time. And so it'd be for the comfort of the children and the staff, which, I would look at it being kind of unfair to leave Neary out of it if you were going to do Trotter and Woodward. But since we're sort of looking at design options for Trotter and Woodward, we're not necessarily committing to doing it. And so that's at least where I sit.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought Superintendent Martin, you said he wouldn't put any money into the school at all, right? So
Well, I think we got to, yeah, he that's what he said, right? And then I think Keith had a slightly different view, but they obviously managed it diplomatically. I mean, I believe, I can't remember if I said it or whether I was thinking it, but one of the things I believe I said it was like creating basically a separate fund that could be utilized for any of the three remaining schools, so Trotter, Neary, or Woodward, to deal with one-off issues over the next couple of years if there's a certain area of a building, or without like committing to a comprehensive plan for any of these three buildings, right? So if you have an area of the school that's getting damp and they can see it looking to become like Finn again, being able to deal with that in the moment, I would be open to something like that without designating a school, basically making it available for all three schools. And nothing more than like 50,000. I don't know if I said that or not, or if I was just thinking it, but that's kind of where my head's at. But I tend to agree with Joe, right? If you're not going to touch Trotter or Woodward, why are you touching Neary? We obviously know why we're touching Finn, and I think the committee was pretty unanimous with the vote on that.
I think you could also make an argument that at Finn, the children are the youngest and also would be more impacted by environmental conditions than older children as well, which, in terms of air conditioning moving forward in a warming world would, it's not a big sway, but there is some concern on my part about, overheating small children.
Well, but also remember that Finn is mainly because you have a known issue there.
Yes, yeah.
There's no known
That's-
issues at the other three schools.
Mold and children go really well together too. Sorry, bad joke.
Um. Okay, so what do people want to do? Does anyone supportive of Neary independently? Let's start there. Is anyone supportive of giving them access to the potential to further remediate up to $50,000 for any of the other three schools should Finn-like conditions come into play?
I'm not even sure, honestly, if 50 is enough. Based on the feedback from Keith, it was upwards of $150,000 to remediate Finn. And this is specifically for equipment, like air conditioning.
This is specifically for equipment. So this would be to
Okay.
put like an air conditioning unit in. Like that, the actual remediation is not a capital expense.
Yeah,
So
I
this
think
would-
if it's worded that way, I'd be in favor of it.
This would be if room 1, 2, 3 needed an air conditioner, they would have this ability to access it for heating and ventilation needs. Go ahead, Tony.
But they didn't ask for that.
Well, no, they asked for each school separately.
Didn't we also relate to them that we were also interested in some maybe larger, more permanent
We
type of
did.
infrastructure?
We did. Mm-hmm.
So could that money be used to perpetuate or to design? Wait a minute, didn't we approve money to design?
Well, I think they said that one paid enough, right? I don't have the motion in front of me. That's why I'm trying to.
Yeah, no, I'm the one supposed to be responsible for the minutes. So there you go. Hmm.
I'm not wed to my suggestion. I was just throwing it out there as like but it sounded like they need a year to really come back with a plan, is what I took away from that discussion, not 6 months. But I do believe we did take some sort of motion, Joe. You're right. I don't have the actual wording. And if you don't have it here, that's fine. Just you could just send it to me after, because then I'll update the sheet with whatever we have
Oh,
taken.
okay. What I have is that this is why I was going to polish it to get the exact language. But to make 50,000 of free cash of and available to fund a study into AC operations at Woodward and Trotter.
Okay. So it's specific to Woodward and Trotter. And we took no motion on Neary, correct?
No motion on Neary. No,
Okay.
that one was pretty straightforward, as I remember. It was about putting AC in the windows, just like over at Finn. So if that went forward,
And electric upgrade. I heard something separate there too, is they'd actually have to rewire part of the building to make that
may be
happen.
possible. So yeah.
Okay.
But so
it
anyway,
sounds
there
like
is
50 for study, and then we have the full Finn amount is what we've approved so far.
yeah, that's what I have down.
Okay. Does anyone want to do anything more than that related to schools? I'm seeing a lot of no's.
Jason, as far as that 50,000 goes, did you want to change that so it's 50,000 to study, but also for emergency equipment?
No, I kind of like the idea of study.
Okay.
The more I think about it, what I would encourage them to do is, I think they need to think, and this is not something we're going to resolve for them today. I do think they need to think about their facilities maintenance fund moving forward, right? Like John Parent has his own, right? The schools used to survive off of extended day, and other programs that use the facilities. But remember, extended days under their umbrella now, so there's no rent revenue coming in to what they were using to maintain their facilities anymore. It's all going into an extended day revolving fund, which can only be used for extended day. So I think they need to come back with kind of a plan of how they're going to maintain their buildings moving forward, which I think is far beyond HVAC. And I'd encourage them to do it through that sort of thing, not through a separate AC article, if that makes any sense. Okay. All right. Anything else in schools then? We're getting there. All right, so I think it would be prudent to meet one more time next week before the 6th. I guarantee we will not be done after the 6th for FY25 town meeting. I'm looking forward to getting that feedback, right? We haven't gotten any feedback from select board or advisory. And they're gonna, we do have regular budget meetings, but there hasn't been one in a while, and I know it just wasn't pretty last time I heard or met with Mark and Brian. So what do people's, I know we sort of did this already last week, and then we landed on the 26th, but what do people's availability look like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? I think it's gonna be a quick update from a few different department heads, and then final positions on at least what we want to bring forward. And I'll have a draft presentation ready that just will require us to take certain numbers out or in sort of thing.
I have a pretty hard conflict Tuesday night. Wednesday night would be very good for me if that worked for everyone else.
Okay. Others on Wednesday.
Works for
Would
me.
anyone be
That's fine.
adverse to starting at 8? Unfortunately, I have a conflict till 7:30.
Okay. Can you do 7:45? The 15 minutes may make a difference.
I might be a couple minutes late, but
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Steve, did that work for you?
Yeah.
Joe?
Yeah. So
All right.
that's the 10th?
no,
The
the third.
third. The third.
Third. Oh, sorry.
Okay. All right. 7:45 on the 3rd. I have the to-dos, and I'll go back to each of the department heads so they have a heads up, and we'll go from there. Is there any public comment? Tony?
So I had one other topic I just wanted to bring up quick.
Sure.
If the public, so I think the police, right, we're buying more body, or there's a proposal to get more body cameras, right?
Not this year.
Not this year.
They got it last year. They got it all through a grant.
Okay, never mind then. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, the only thing police have this year are cruisers.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other business the committee wants to bring up? All right, then I will move that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Tony?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And I'm I as well. All right. Thanks all for meeting, and talk next week.
Have a good week. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah.